So today I'm off to the States, to Texas, to go and talk to a group of people about how Formula One operates so successfully. So what did we learn then from the first test? Well, surprisingly little, I guess. These tests are always very difficult to read too much into, given the fact that we don't know what anyone is doing with tyres, with engine settings, with fuel loads, with the various components that they're running on the car, what performance targets they're even trying to achieve. So very difficult to ever judge the performance of the teams after the first test, even the second test to some extent. But this one was even more tricky to guess because of the weather. So cold in Barcelona. Almost aside from signing off new components and getting mileage onto these brand new Formula One cars, in terms of performance levels, very difficult for the teams, let alone us fans and the media, to get any kind of comparison or any kind of judgment as to where teams sit in any pecking order. One way we can look at it is on the reliability front, and in that sense it definitely looks fairly ominous again that Mercedes were pretty bulletproof. A huge number of laps. Incidentally, they did set the fastest time with Lewis Hamilton as well, which was set on medium tyres. Ferrari, who were a few tenths off, set their time on the softer tyre, although I guess the caveat for that is that with the temperatures being so cold in Barcelona, it may not be like it normally is that the softer tyre is the quicker tyre, because they all have different temperature working ranges. And in the very cold conditions, the medium tyre actually might have been the faster and the better tyre to be on. Mercedes looked strong. Probably the biggest surprise for me on the reliability front was the Toro Rosso Honda. They did more laps than anybody else over that first test with a Honda power unit in the back. I mean, what a McLaren looking down the pit lane thinking at that. This time last year, McLaren was struggling to get the thing out of the garage, struggling to complete an installation lap, and yet Honda smashed around and did something well over 300 laps. I think more than any other team. So things are looking good for Honda in that sense, at least. If you've got a reliable car, you can then start to work on how to make it fast. As McLaren found last year, if you've got an unreliable car, you can't collect any data, you can't learn anything. Trying to make an unreliable car quick is a lot more difficult than trying to make a reliable car quick. So things are looking good in that sense for Toro Rosso. Mercedes, I think, were the next in line in terms of the number of laps recorded over the course of the week. I said it in yesterday's vlog. It seems bizarre to me that we still go to Barcelona for pre-season testing. It's so cold. It always is. This is not, this was particularly bad, of course, this week, but it's always too cold, and we always get the same complaints about not being able to get any meaningful running done. What else did we know? McLaren looked a lot more reliable, certainly than this time last year, and as I said, that's a great basis to start from. Way too early to tell what the performance is like. Often in these situations, it's better to look to the comments that the team are making, the comments and the body language even, that the drivers and the team management are offering up after getting out of the car or at the end of a day, than anything that the lap time or the timesheets record. McLaren look to be, I would say, hesitant to be overconfident, which is probably the right thing to do. But they certainly don't look like they are in a desperate situation like they were 12 months ago. The Renault's reliable. We don't expect a huge leap forward in terms of power unit performance from Renault, because they've very much focused on reliability, as most of the engine suppliers have had to do, given that we're going down to 3 power unit elements per car per season. That's a big change. Meaning that each one of those engines has to do now 7 races, given that we've got 21 races this year. So they've had to focus on durability and reliability, perhaps over outright performance gains. But still, that Renault power unit is a much better base for McLaren to work from, given where they were. Yeah, there are a lot more smiles around that garage, which is really nice to see. Charles Leclerc, I thought, did really well in his debut. If you measure him against his teammate, which is the only measure you can really have, and even that you've got a caveat with not knowing what everyone's doing on any particular day, but I thought he had a strong debut in the car, really, really good. Red Bull, probably still up there, knocking on the door of the top three, I would have said, looking, very, very roughly. Didn't manage to complete a huge number of laps. I think if Toro Rosso completed well over 300, I think, from memory I think Red Bull were just over 200 for various different reasons. But they certainly don't look like a team that is struggling. And I think this time last year, Red Bull had a bit of a shock to the system. The car didn't perform anywhere near their expectations. And that puts you straight on the back foot as a team. This year they don't look like that situation has occurred. They had huge correlation problems. If you remember last year, the data they were getting from the car didn't match the data that they had in their wind tunnel, which was meant a lot of head scratching. They had to kind of really change their ethos around aerodynamics on the car in the early part of the season. So they were always on the back foot in 2017. This year it looks and feels like they're in a much better place to start the championship. What we really want to know, of course, is how close are Red Bull, how close are Ferrari to Mercedes, if we're going to say Mercedes are still favourites. And from what early signs we have from Test 1, probably that is what we are saying. Mercedes are still, if not favourites, definitely up there and in the mix. So what we want to know is how close are the rest. And it's just, so difficult to say. My early feelings are that Ferrari, possibly Red Bull, and hopefully McLaren will be able to start knocking on the door of Mercedes this year. But the early signs, and at this very early stage, and I know I keep saying it, don't read too much into this, the early signs are that Mercedes still look very, very strong for 2018. Let's go. What can we expect from Test 2? Well, more of the same to some extent, but temperatures are expected to be a bit warmer in Barcelona, so hopefully less of the cold temperature issues, hopefully slightly more chance of being able to switch tyres on and therefore collecting some data on those, and most importantly therefore perhaps starting to work on some sort of performance runs on the cars.
Hello, welcome all. 30 minutes. Okay.
So in between times, everything will be taken apart and inspected, as you can imagine, at microscopic levels, as to check for any signs of wear, any signs of imminent failure. And I would fully expect there to be a certain number, quite a substantial number, of updates ahead of the second test too. One of the plus sides of being in Barcelona, I know I keep saying it's a terrible idea, one of the plus sides of being in Barcelona is the fact that it's pretty close to most of the team's factories. And therefore it's pretty quick and pretty easy logistically to get upgrades from the factory to the car, get things from the car and the track back to the factory to be modified. So if teams found any problems or found any areas that they think they can improve, it's not unfeasible and in fact highly likely that those things will be turned around very quickly and brought onto the car for week 2's test. Don't forget, that's the last opportunity to run a car before they all get to Australia. I'm really looking forward to seeing how the performance levels shake up.